Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. So I think I have around 40 minutes here. This work was previously presented in hurried little 10-minute bursts at conferences. So I think I'll take advantage of this pace. So if it seems like I'm rambling a little bit, that might be intentional. And sorry, maybe my voice, I have a bit of a cold, but I have a toddler at home, so I have a cold all the time in the winter. It's fine. So for those of you who don't know, at MyVision, we use video to count cars for the traffic industry using computer vision. We have 650 customers in over 50 countries. So this is mostly traffic engineering firms, traffic data collectors, and municipalities. So in particular, our most popular and successful product involves portable surveillance cameras that are set up at a roadway or an intersection, lending another meaning to KW Intersection's name. Our customers require offline vehicle volume counts broken down by each lane. So note that these are uncalibrated cameras, and we don't have the ability to calculate the extrinsic parameters, where it is in the world. For these setups, since we receive thousands of hours a week of new setups, novel situations. So hence we can't employ the traditional methods involving affine transformations and homographies, such as Mary presented a few months ago. Beyond that, we have to correctly label each lane. So for example, this could be a northbound left. And this being a temporary installation, we're left to maybe manually mark up the video to show the algorithm where the lanes are for vehicle counting.
After the camera is installed, you have to manually tell it. So that's kind of calibration, isn't it?
Right, but not in the standard setting with a standard check pattern and lens parameters and stuff. So we're forced to just work in the image space. There's also setups coming from companies that have their own cameras, and we really don't know what we're getting when our video comes in. So our general approach for vehicle counting is to define each lane in the video and then straighten it to a simple video with a linear lane space of vehicles traveling horizontally. So that way we're just detecting and tracking vehicles moving in a simple horizontal motion, so we don't have to solve the general data association and tracking problem. So what we have found in practice is that manual lane markup is actually problematic. It's costly and done mostly imprecisely. Humans are relying on visible road cues. So we're attempting to automate this process using computer vision, and we found doing lane discovery using vehicle motion provides more precise and consistent location of lanes. So we get input video and we run it through and find the motion. So how do we do this? Well, luckily we have a reliable video detection system, vehicle video detection system that we've experimented using sort of in a pre-processing step prior to counting. It finds precise vehicle contours everywhere in a frame So we have a short demo here. So bear with me while I try and Chromecast this. Great, looks good. Okay, so that was the same input video that we saw on the slide. So this is a deep neural net for finding salient pixels in a closed contour belonging inside of relevant objects like vehicles. So it's promising preliminary work by Drs. Mishra and Ashkar at MyoVision. And yes, so you see it gives the contours, and we'll be registering each of the points in this moving video on a single 2D histogram that we call vehicle motion map. So we'll be actually using the bottom point of the contour, and I'll get into why that is in this slide here. Let's just get back.
What's the job of this camera? What the whole system expected to do? What's the deliverable?
Oh, sorry.
Do you need, for example, do you want to identify the congestion of each road, or what do you want to get from the system? Then we go back, how do you identify the cars and lanes?
Yes. So this is the reports that traffic engineers are used to. So the main product is just volume counts. So they want volume counts broken down by each lane, and that involves identifying individuals.
Does it include speed as well in each lane? Average speed or
yes,
something?
Thanks. Speed.
Not the speed per se, but how fast or slow
a relative
is
one. So we do have tracking, but in order to get the speed in the real world, you really do have to have it calibrated precisely in order to make measurements like that. So on slide 10. But the output really would, after we get the lane, they have vehicle volumes broken down by lane. So
but
per
without
minutes.
calibration, you can still tell relative speed. Is it getting faster or getting slower?
And things like conflict analysis and if they're going to collide and things like that. So those are other things we're researching, but the main product really is volume for right now in this work. So we run that contour finding through all the frames in the video, and these are sort of the registered density histograms. They're two-dimensional histograms, and you can see the signal is quite strong along each lane. And then we fit multiple spline curves to this density, giving each lane. And this we do so we can find the lanes without having to do the data association problem in 2 dimensions. So I mentioned that we use the bottom point of the contours. That's a subtle but important aside. So the reason is that I have a little cartoon to show it. We have vehicles of varied size, so cars, vans, and tractor trailers. And you can see here that that means that the sort of the tops and the middles of where the vehicles appear may vary in a frame, but the bottoms of all vehicles traveling in one particular lane sort of roughly lie on the same point. So a curve traced out by the bottom point of a contour best characterizes where that contour appears in the lane.
One question. How do you, at the end, after you found the points by using splines, quadratic splines,
Right.
How do you represent the line between the lanes? Do you represent them by a polynomial or?
It is a quadratic polynomial, yeah, a degree 2 polynomial. Yeah. So. Yeah.
How do shadows get problematic for you guys?
They can be a bit of a problem, but the deep neural net. Okay, he was wondering about shadows.
Okay.
So we're finding contours, but this deep neural net is trained. So for vehicles, and it sort of has shadows built into its ephemeral deep neural netness. If that sort of
That's
answered.
different type of.
Yeah, so it's not standard background subtraction, it's actually
No, I mean like
detection.
different time of the day, like same intersection could appear like different with different density maps. If you have like car
Yeah.
shadows that are like steeped.
Yeah. So if the car shadows were, if we get false positives inside the car shadow.
Yeah, like
that-
the
that
vehicle is
doesn't-
in like lane 1 and the shadows
Yeah.
make it seem that the
Right.
vehicle
So that's a matter of our vehicle detector having to be able to distinguish what's a vehicle and what's just what's cast by its shadow. So standard background subtraction, that becomes difficult, but the deep neural net is trying to learn to differentiate, motion caused by what's a vehicle and what's just shadow cast by the vehicle. So it's not perfect, but we hope to be able to just get vehicle signal without without getting interference from shadows.
Right.
So a bit about the spline fitting. We use a sequential RANSAC-like search to find the lanes. So before I get into the details of our search, I'll just do a review of RANSAC, which stands for Random Sampling Consensus. So it's used when you want to estimate model fits to data, like a regression, but in the presence of outliers. So we have outliers here. And you don't want the outliers to affect the estimates of your model. So here's an example where we'll say the fitting model is just a simple line. So the idea is to take your data and pick random samples. And when you pick them, you have to make sure to choose just enough to fully specify your model. So in the case of the line, we have 2 points. That specifies one lane model. So you make lane proposals. So every time you make a random selection, you propose a model. And then for each one, you would classify inliers that are close to your model and outliers that are outside. And we propose many random models, and we pick the one with the most inliers selected. And then that's refined using regression only on the inliers. So in our case, our search is for quadratic splines, as mentioned. So that's the unique degree 2 polynomial. It's a polynomial that goes through a set of 3 points. And as we'll see, we also have adjust for thickness as well. So we have 3 points and thickness of the spline. There is a variant on RANSAC called multi-RANSAC for fitting multiple simultaneous models. So in its naive form, it's merely just an iterated reapplication of RANSAC where you find a model one at a time and then remove its inliers and continue to find all the other models. So we're aware from literature that it's not really the best idea to use RANSAC for multiple models, so we tweaked it a little bit. So instead of doing the standard counting inliers, we devised what we call a fidelity score to compute the suitability of a random spline, and that's computed using a image kernel. So The image kernel is specified by a spline. It's sort of inspired by Gabor filters, and it works like this. So here's an example. We have a spline, so we have a white positive area for fitting in liars. The black is sort of a negative penalty region, and then gray is just 0. It's innocuous. So what we'll do is we'll show a density image and then apply some kernels and see what they do. So here's an example density image. And this kernel, we apply by doing element-wise multiplication. This one sort of gives a high score because of all the green inlier. And there's relatively little red penalty, which is negative. So here's one. That one's quite negative and probably should be shifted up a bit to better fit the density. If everyone can see the density image here, might be kind of faint. So this one's interesting. This one crosses. That's the one I want. This one crosses a bunch of lanes. So it does have a lot of inliers, but at the same time you have sort of canceling out because of the penalty area. So it's, let's say, roughly around 0. So it's not as positive. So of the 3, we would choose, if they were proposed, we would choose the first one. So we pick a curve that has the best data fidelity score computed this way. And then we proceed to do a hill climb to maximize the 3 control points and a thickness with respect to that score. So that's how we get its location, and we adjust for thickness to cover the signal. So I guess just to see it would probably be the best description. So we'll have a look at lane discovery in action here on this simple video. So here's a frame from the video. And we run it and get the contours, and we register and get this density map. So here's the vehicle density map for that particular video.
You describe the color.
Yes, so there's color here, you'll notice. So recently we've added color as another feature to show the orientation also of the motion where the positions are located. So this adds a nice extra feature to fit and gives us more information. So here in this case we see the 2 main lanes from the video, each going in opposite directions, so the red and the blue. And then a little bit of outliers and noise around it. So that will begin our next demo. So we'll can bring it up. So we'll see that same video with the random search displayed. So here's our density map. So this is proposing random splines. What you see displayed, I think it's iterating many splines, and what you're seeing is the one with the best fidelity score so far. I think we propose 1,000 and choose the best one. So once you see it choose the best one, it begins the hill climb. So you see it's changing the control points, and there's a thickness actually changing to best fit the signal here. And once the hill climbing is complete, we sort of paint in zeros over the density map to remove it from the proposals and proceed to find new models with the fidelity score. So we find another model there. This locks onto the second signal, and it hill climbs similarly, and we get it. So we keep this up.
I was just going to say, a lot of the subtle work is making it so that our measure can actually help climb towards an optimal solution.
Right. So
Anyway.
the details of the fidelity score and the constraints we put on the hill climb, but we have a hill climb that, so it's no coincidence that it does okay. So we continue searching for splines until no spline can be found with a sufficiently high fidelity score. So I did find a valid one there, but the score wasn't high enough. So now in a final step, we go back and we take all the obtained splines and we refine them again on the original density map with all the original pixels remaining. So that way you refine it with all the original data, so you don't get spurious splines that sort of just fit coincidences, say, beside a model that's been removed. Okay, bear with me, we gotta get back up to 27. You can stop me for a question if you see one. Okay, and this is the resulting specification. So here's another one that includes bike and pedestrian data as well. Our contour finder find those. So we have nice, orderly, straight walking in the bike and the pedestrian lane, so you won't be surprised to hear that this video came from Germany.
Draw the contour, how much, there are this magic wand tool in graphic applications.
Right.
That they use when you click somewhere and it goes, the color is similar, and draw a contour.
Yeah.
So how much that algorithm is useful in your case? How much?
Yeah. So the earlier ones like flood fill really don't do the trick. There's fancier ones. So there's a watershed, I believe.
No, the flood fill is different.
Yeah.
This only shows you the contour of
right. Yeah.
The area with almost the same color.
Right. That's interesting. We can apply some of them. I don't know if we've looked into it too much. These give us models because we know that there's lanes and we know that it's a vehicle traveling in a certain way. And those are really general image processing algorithms.
I asked, is it useful because your application is a bit different because it has movement in it.
Right.
Regular image is still, so you
Yes.
do it. But when it's movement, then one object may become split into two objects if the angle changes. For example, a car or two cars going behind each other from one angle, you get one contour for both of them if they are close
Right.
enough.
Oh yes, during
When
the
they
video.
move and the view angle changes, then you see two different cars.
Right.
So how that problem is solved in your case?
Okay. Oh, actually, we're joined here by Dave Swartz. He's actually the
Yeah.
creator of this algorithm. So.
So I was just going to
Yeah,
say
so
the deep neural network contour finding is I guess it's very trendy these days, and it's state of the art. But it's
Anything AI is
It's-
trendy these days.
right, and this is one of them. And I can't tell you all the details, and actually it's one of the actually because I don't understand it.
No,
But with deep neural networks, it's a machinery where you load in millions of pictures of cars, no shadows, so it understands what a car looks like somehow, and that's the ideal end goal, is that what we're getting back is a measure of actually recognized cars, and in a very smart way. So we're not dealing with textures or anything like that. But
So you don't go with the shades of color to determine the contour.
yeah,
because it's moving.
It's like a it's the
Yeah, it's much more advanced.
yeah. We let the there's a couple names on the at the beginning of the slide, Andrew and Akshaya.
Yes.
Who,
Sorry, I believe I failed to introduce everyone at this first slide. Let me go back and do that. Yes. So
those are the wizards
there
who make that happen.
Deep learning team. Dave here.
So
And I'm just the presenter.
our algorithm today is kind of standing on their shoulders. They're providing us a really nice clean signal,
Being this signal.
and then we're lane finding. There.
So we've seen this video, and you can see that it's a bit slow because of the fidelity score. This is computer over the image. It's slow to compute, and we have to compute it many, many times when if we want to propose enough splines to reasonably expect to land on a good initial solution that we're going to hill climb on. So it's not a deterministic algorithm, it's non-deterministic. We haven't really analyzed the theoretical properties to guarantee a good result, so we just run it a lot and sort of cross our fingers. But in our case, we still have a user that must go in and apply the lane labels, which couldn't be automated. So they have an opportunity to, say, remove some of the spurious splines and make small corrections that inevitably will pop up. So we found that this is sort of really only effective with a human in the loop.
When you say that it's slow, how slow is slow?
Yes, so that was a real-time demonstration of
Okay.
it. So really the longest part is to collect the density histogram.
Right.
So that we're doing with GPUs, like using TensorFlow and GPUs, and it'll take slightly slower than real time, but we're doing it as a pre-processing step, so you have to process an hour of video, get the density histogram, and perform this, and then you're ready to start counting vehicles. So that being done, now we're going to go on to an overview of how we proceed to take these lanes and straighten them for straight video. So far what we've done is we've provided lane locations, and I'm hoping everyone here is willing to let me hand wave for a second and say that we use, say, the thickness of the spline to get two curves for a lane, each one flanking both sides of a lane, and we'll call the two curves F0 and F1. So the warping solution kind of amounts to applying a spline surface interpolation. So in practice, that means we'll be constructing this rectilinear rectified image, R, from our source video image, I, using a transformation T. So given that the lane edges are parameterized by some parameter U, so they're polynomials in U, then U gives us the position along the lane, and then we have another parameter V, which gives the position along a line that goes across the lane at those 2 points. So we use this transformation, and we can populate all the pixels in a rectified image from the source image, and we get a straightened image where the vehicles sort of travel along the rectified line. So here's the result for one simple single lane. Note that this method, we're really only straightening the surface of the road. And since all the pixels of vehicles don't lie entirely on the surface of the road, it does cause a little bit of distortion.
One question. In this image, every car turns left, or some cars can go straight.
So this particular image is only rectifying the ones that turn left.
So,
and then
but the actual
video,
the place, some cars can go straight. So
that's right.
You create two different.
We create different lanes for each one. So in each one, you just have the simple case of finding vehicles that traverse the entire.
The straight one is straight already. So.
Right. So it doesn't. It's almost innocuous, but it brings it. But not. It is straight, but it's not horizontal. So we bring it. It's almost like rotating it. Free choice that we haven't really discussed yet is the way you parameterize the curve, or you can reparameterize the curves. So we've played around with different schemes and attempts to achieve certain characteristics. So this is our just demonstrative example lane. We'll call it a lane. It's just a region, but we have sort of a curved top curve does a bunch of funny stuff, and the bottom curve is just straight, so we can kind of get a view of what's going on. So here's a checkered pattern that shows the original spline parameterization. So this would rectify to a perfectly straight checkered pattern. As you see, so the bottom is straight already, and all the lines would straighten out, and we get perfect checkerboard. So you can play with different ways to reparameterize the curves. The most simple and common parameterization is arc length. So this is reparameterization with respect to arc length. So you can see now the top curve is doing some funny stuff here, and now it's if you follow it, it's alternating black and white sort of at even lengths, like you would expect in the bottom. But we sort of need a little bit more than that. So we've attempted what we call a pseudo perspective. So this is done where the derivative of the parameter is inversely proportional to the width of the lane. So what that means is the concept here is that when the lane is very narrow and small, it means it's likely far away from the camera. And when it's wider, it's closer to the camera. So if you do this, then you end up with images where the vehicles will sort of travel at a constant speed. It does a bit of correction for the perspective foreshortening. So they'll travel at a constant speed, and they won't stretch or shrink if they travel in lanes that sort of move towards or away from the camera. And there's a variation on this, which is the vanishing point. So here we just reparameterize the top spline such that all the cross-lane lines converge at a single point, which is sort of the infinite vanishing point on the road plane. This is the one we actually use in practice. This does most of what we want. Okay, so when we rectified, so you mentioned there's different lanes going different directions. So we do rectify different lanes, but if we want to properly handle things like occlusions and tracking vehicles properly when they're sort of interacting, we sort of need to rectify all adjacent lanes simultaneously. And this requires sort of rectifying each lane and the gaps between them in all parallel lanes in a sort of a stacked multi-lane rectified image.
Do you cut when the one lane becomes one flow basically becomes two different flows? Because if you don't and you create two different flows, then when you calculate the volume, or you want to get the volume, some of the volume of each lane suddenly disappears.
Right.
So you have two here, then it becomes 1.5 here.
Yeah, or that's handled during the tracking. So in order to count something as a volume, it has to appear at the beginning of the lane, traverse the entire lane, and appear off the end. So the things that disappear, we have to properly track them and account for them. So when you're stacking multiple lanes like this, you have to take care to maintain continuity between each adjacent piece in the resulting image. So that's done with reparameterization, lockstep reparameterization on each one. Okay, so we have yet another demo. So here's a live demo, or sorry, not a live demo, but a captured demo of lane straightening video. So we're straightening, I don't know if you see the yellow straight lane through the middle. So this one's interesting because the curvature is introduced by the curve of a spherical lens. So we just have a general approach. It's sort of agnostic to the source of the curvature of the lane. So whether it's from the lens or whether it's a truly curved lane in the real world, that really doesn't matter. It just sort of affects the choice of reparameterization that you use. Yeah, so you can see that the middle lane there is completely straightened, so we'd be looking for ones that go completely across from the beginning to end of the lane.
Do you get a lot of spherical data from spherical cameras, or is it mostly the 90 degrees?
Mostly wide angle, but certainly not spherical. But in this approach, we don't really have to do any lens modeling. It's just based on motion, so whatever happens, we deal with it. But currently not a lot of spherical video, but it certainly does happen. So in fairness to last month's talk on election predictions in Poland, I think it's fair to examine where this might go horribly wrong. So we have one here. It's the video, and you can see this happening. We'll see, all we see here is the density map, so it's sort of hard to appreciate what's going on, but it's almost a failure to the signal as much as anything else. So we have water on the lens, it's very wet, lots of reflections. So it actually can find a bit of signal there, so it doesn't do too badly with the, things look good so far. But now you can see when you can't really completely find a signal and you can't find it among the noise, even though we found one lane and we canceled out, it doesn't really know what to do with the rest of this density. And it's optimizing with respect to the fidelity score, and we're not really sure what to do with data like this.
Could you use something other than histogram, something that potentially allows you to remove all the data that came from the sources that were largely in that area? Or?
Okay, so sort of a lookup. Well, we've been discussing other things like, yeah, so we've seen ones with the orientation there. So we don't really want to remove all data, but we'd like to be able to filter by orientation
so
and
you
remove,
don't just-
remove something like that. That is open right now, an open question. We're still doing the basic
This,
research.
when you install a camera, you do the lane detection only once. You don't do it every time, do you?
Right, but these are temporarily installed cameras. They only install it for 1 day or so, and then they take it down and move it in.
But if you want to monitor the flow of traffic, head to the traffic, camera has to be there all the time, right?
Our customers really so rather than installing sort of expensive rigs they'll have one camera and they'll move it around, so that gives them wider coverage of their city. But unfortunately, it means that we always have new data coming in with new setups.
My point is basically, if you separate the detection, line detection, road detection from the flow detection, and get a much more accurate road detection from satellite feed that's available, roads are not going to change. So you can tell the camera where it's installed, and you can immediately get the road in front of it very, very accurately.
Right. Yes. So that would be sort of an update to the camera surveillance system, where we would be able to say get its location and pitch angle and things like that. So right now that it's a dumb camera that doesn't do that sort of thing. But
Can be fed through the central computer.
Right.
For example, from Google Maps.
Right.
You have all the maps. You have all the lanes. You can actually see the satellite feed, and you get much better perspective when you look perpendicularly
right.
on the surface. So it's much easier to detect the lanes and
Yeah.
everything.
So yeah, if you can really register the sort of the pose of the camera in the real world, that's certainly probably a good data set to sort of base it on. So that's certainly things we're considering for sort of newer iterations of the camera system.
One thing we realize is people don't follow the road paint, and so
Yeah.
we want
Yeah,
to,
and then it sort of all goes out the window when sort of a lane is temporarily blocked, and for this particular day, everyone seems to be going around some obstruction or something.
So the detours, the lane is actually the path that the vehicles take, not
Right.
the actual lane
Yes.
line on the
Yeah, it's not specified by geometry or sort of city planning or anything like that. It's really a statistical measure of where vehicles have been traveling
what the
recently.
degree of alcohol in driving
Yeah,
abroad.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the noise that we hope to be able to filter out. Yeah, we have a question.
Would the same methodology work with non-visible light, like infrared and so on? I'm not sure how contour.
Yeah. So the contour
would work with that.
Yeah. Indeed, it could, but you would have to be retrained on that modality. So yeah, different modes. A lot of deep neural net stuff seems to be based on standard images, but I'm sure people are training neural nets on different modalities easily. So something like infrared or FLIR heat images would certainly have a strong signal for vehicles, and then you wouldn't have as much of a problem with interference like shadows and reflections and stuff like that. Yeah, definitely a good idea, but they make for expensive camera installations. So that one was blurry signal. Sometimes you get, and that's the other thing, customers will do funny things like set up a camera right in front of a occluding wire. So that sort of overpowered the signal and just fit signal to that. Or they'll set it up in the middle of the night and there are no vehicles, we have no signal. So I guess it's correct technically that we didn't find anybody. And it can get even worse with reflections but by and large it succeeds. So thank you. Any questions?
separate? So there's only one contour finder that works with both the spherical videos and the regular video, or do you have separate ones that handle different cases?
We don't handle different cases, but that's an interesting. We don't have enough spherical video to warrant any
But
special.
it seems to sort of work for the
Yeah.
spherical.
So it's the training is really to find salient close contours, and putting a vehicle through a spherical lens doesn't really change that characteristic too much. Like locally, they kind of look the same.
Right. So you're only doing individual frames of that, and that gives you like the contours for that frame.
Right.
So have you experimented at all with actually like trying to correlate contours from adjacent frames and use the velocity directions as a?
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought that was. I might not have clarified it, but we do a little bit. So,
Yeah, so
we don't want to do the
adjacent
full
frame
data.
velocities,
So
but you're not using like trying to produce a full path. Right?
full paths, no. We found that sort of you can do it a little bit, but in general, it's too unreliable to get the important things like the location of your lanes, which you depend on for the rest of the processing. We do small amounts of association just for the directionality, so that's where these colors come from here. But maybe, yes, some sort of hybrid where we're doing some local tracking and then some registration might help it a bit. But the idea was not to have to solve the multiple target, because then you have data association things crossing each other, and you have when it gets unreliable and in sort of heavily congested video frames, then this ends up giving you a stronger signal in the first place.
Something like just a lower level optical flow approach work, where you're basically just trying to track pixel patches independent of like, vehicle contour, give you some more full trajectories.
The shadows is an example of something that would throw a wrench.
Yeah.
into it.
So yeah, there's optical flow is and especially getting a good dense optical flow is always tricky. And then then standard optical flow you're going to be thrown by moving things like shadows and any sort of texture that sort of moves. And we also, as you see, this kind of low resolution video, and we have a lot of artifacts introduced just by the compression, the quantization. So
It feels
yeah.
like you could do something hybrid where you're getting some sort of path like that, and then using that as a filter on your fidelity score. Like so, basically trying
Yeah.
to produce a.
I see. Yeah. So the samples don't have to be points. They could be entire, let's say, tracklets or something that you want to be fitting many tracklets all together, and you can use a couple of them as samples. It's an interesting idea. So yes, the 2D histogram, it started as a plain 2D histogram. Now we have a 2D histogram enhanced with directionality, but there could be more data than just that.
And some of that flow you're getting for free from your H.264 motion vectors, right?
Yes, the motion vectors.
The magic. On another note, why is it that you run the lane discovery video like at near real time for the entire video? Why not sample, maybe randomly take?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
quarter of the video, or?
Yeah, it actually isn't the entire video. Can you clarify exactly? So we start it and we register, and there's a stopping condition.
Oh, yeah, so we're building a histogram.
Yeah.
And we go until we get enough signal, until the number of car frame, the number of frames of cars that we have is like 10,000 or something.
So until a strong enough video, or till the end if there are no
It
vehicles.
could be like an hour, it could be 2 minutes. Okay.
So one last thing, do you feel like you're getting to the point where you could train a classifier based on the video that you've done with these techniques?
Oh yes. So not fully confident, but we do seed training from these, but it ultimately still requires a human in the loop to correct it a little bit.
But I mean, now you've got those human corrected curves. Can you then use that to try and train a full-on path, like just feed it the video.
Oh, sort of end-to-end
Yeah.
happening. That'd be interesting. I'm not. We would have to construct a novel network, a network that, yeah, the output, like you'd have to work out the wiring of the input nodes and what the output nodes and what they would be. But I mean, we do have data now.
I think conferences might like a paper about that, but our bosses already have it working.
Right. Yes. And
There's practical and academic.
and I don't have a lot of practical experience with deep neural nets. I've just sort of talked with people on the other team, but I've never really wired up a novel one like that. Well, I have to admit.
There's only so many possible cameras and only so many possible, I don't know how many in reality, but
Yeah.
it can be possible to perhaps try to figure out what kind of camera it is and also what kind of road chunk you're looking at.
Yeah, the bigger trick is the road trunk you're looking at. So yeah, so we've heard ideas like having a satellite map and then sort of registering it on that. If we do pull in some extra data, like maybe the orientation of the camera, like if you have accelerometers, or
I mean, like even if you don't have the actual map, I mean, the roads are made up of only, I think there's so many different substances.
okay, I see. So you sort of classify the setup. Is it sort of a
Yeah, is it like
a straight on lane or you know, a side setup? I mean, we do have a lot of data to play with there, but no current no current project in that field. But it's an interesting idea.
There's a surprising amount of variety.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, off the top.
I never mistake one video for another.
Right.
They all have their personalities.
And yeah, and the customers never cease to amaze us with the strange contortions and setups they might make. And you'd be surprised what's out there, I guess we'll say that.
So after the lane discovery and the normalization, I guess, what's the algorithm that counts, and like how well does it count, and what
Yeah,
are the
so
kind of things
that
you see?
one is it's a more naive multiple target tracking and data association, but it's simpler because the data association is sort of vehicle is here, then it'll be here. It progresses along the lane, and yeah. So we do have those contours to begin with. So we're sort of taking the contours. Sometimes we'll have to split and merge them, but the contours give the positions for the tracker. And the tracker is sort of just a basic filter, and then the data association is done in this. We've simplified it enough so the data association doesn't have to be like a fancy multiple hypothesis one. It's just association of data that moves along a lane, and then simple filtering on that. That's why we go through the trouble of doing it in the first place.
You have your orientation data that is your curves, and then you're straightening the curves to be straight lines.
Yeah.
Do you use the orientation data to make it so that all of the lanes go like left to right or right to left, or does your tracker track edge to edge and it doesn't care which direction they travel?
Yeah. So we found that doing edge to edge is fine. Like we've simplified the tracker enough that requiring it to be one direction turns out to be not ideal. So in a case like this, in a case like this, where we're sort of stacking multiple ones and tracking, this one maybe not the best example, but sometimes you would have abutting lanes that are traveling in opposite directions. So it's best to have them together and to be able to track left to right and right to left, to be able to distinguish vehicles that might be partially occluding each other but traveling in opposite directions.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.